Hey everybody, welcome back to Concierge Confidential. I'm your host, Brian Ortega, and we're back for another week. And this week, we're going to be highlighting a couple different types of hotels and whether or not that you should be in that sort of category or something that you're looking for, or if you need to sort of scale back sort of your expectations for when you come to Las Vegas. So this isn't sort of like telling you that you have to sort of fit in one of these boxes, because who wants that? But it's just to kind of give you sort of an idea of what to expect out of those particular hotels, if you're going to be visiting them, maybe for a day, if you're going to be staying at that property, or maybe you want to pop over to that property just to, see what it looks like. So this episode, don't really know what I'm going to call it, but we're going to call it the category section of the Las Vegas Strip, and we're going to be doing that coming up next. Okay, everybody, so let's go ahead and dive into the episode. So we're going to be talking about a couple different sort of levels, if you will, on the Las Vegas Strip. You can really sort of section out what property is what. So for example, we have like the top tier would be luxury. We also have like ultra luxury, which would be sort of above that, which yes, that is a possibility, but we're going to keep it simple and just say luxury. Then we're going to have the economical category, which is going to be, someplace that is actually, pretty nice. It might be a little bit aged. It might be in a certain part of the Strip that is not the center, but economical really has best of both worlds. They usually have one fine dining restaurant and a lot of different places that are good for sort of casual dining. Then we have super budget. So super budget would be something, for example, that has, maybe like a really nice chain restaurant on the inside, but that also helps keep the prices low, but gives the appearance of being, somewhat of a fine dining, restaurant for that property. Then we also have super budget, but maybe not worth going in. So that's really only going to apply to maybe like two properties. And again, that one is not saying like you're staying there because of that, but just sort of trying to inform what you should expect going in. So let's go ahead and start at the super budget, because I usually want to sort of work our way up to luxury. So in the super budget range, a good way to look at this, besides the hotel room prices, would be how much you're paying per dinner, because that's probably going to be the more expensive of many of the dining options that you're going to have when you eat at that restaurant, or eat at that property. So hotels that sort of drop into sort of the super budget range would be places like Excalibur, places like the Luxor. I would also throw places like the Cromwell in there. The Cromwell's actually in a good little spot, but let's go ahead and let's skip the Cromwell for now, but we'll definitely throw in the Link. We'll also throw in Harrah's property. So these like super budget hotels may not actually be super budget when it comes to the pricing for the hotel rooms, just because it's all based on flexible pricing. Dynamic pricing is what we call it for the rooms. If we have a big giant, concert in town or things of that nature, those tend to sort of bump up the price. But in terms of the things that you're going to be getting on the property, for some of these budget hotels, you will still get a spa, but the spa won't have sort of like the latest features. It's typically a little bit more aged on the inside of the spas, so you'll still be able to get a spa in that property. And it's not always guaranteed, especially with these super budget properties. Also, you tend to find very reasonable lodging prices, and typically they have a good amount of food options. They might even have like a food court. Food courts are sort of like the old school thing in town. If you still have one, you're probably in this like sort of super budget range. Case in point, Luxor and Excalibur both have, food courts, but they're really good. Don't put down food courts, because I love the Excalibur has a Cinnabon. They have a hot dog on a stick as well, which are absolutely fantastic. They used to have a McDonald's, same thing with a lot of MGM properties, but and I believe McDonald's found it was too expensive to keep these in, and they took them out of those properties. Many of these places now have like Fat Burger stands inside, or Johnny Rockets, not Fat Burger, Johnny Rockets, which sometimes isn't always the same. But typically, you're looking to pay about $30 to $75 per dinner, per person when you're at one of these properties. So you're thinking of like El Diablo Cantina, where you can get away with, maybe $50 per person, 75 depending if you've been drinking or not. They usually have a nice restaurant that usually isn't super fine dining, like they have Rice and Company at Luxor, which is nice. Also, If you go to Excalibur, they'll have things like the Buca de Beppo on the inside, which is really good for large groups. You can share. It can sound expensive when you go in, but it's very large portions, so it sort of balances out. But they do have steakhouses inside of those two properties. So, for example, they'll have things like, what do they have over at Excalibur? I think it's actually called just the Steakhouse. A lot of places also just have like these steakhouse names, which is very lame. But same thing with like Harrah's. Like if you go up to Harrah's, you're going to find the people that go to like places like Harrah's, Link, what else am I talking about? So Excalibur, they tend to be a little bit more relaxed. You're going to find people who are just, there for like a 3-day weekend. Sometimes they're there for like a holiday weekend as well. They're usually very, very chill. A lot of beer drinkers, a lot of just sort of straight cocktail people. But this is sort of like the vibe you're trying to go for if you just want to be like laid back, you don't want to be judged, and everybody's kind of having a good time at most of these places. It's not super like cutthroat in terms of gambling, but they usually have lower limits, which is nice, but you just have to go at the right times, obviously. But they typically have lots of blackjack tables. They have a good amount of action on roulette, and they also have a good amount of action on the craps tables as well. So you do get a lot of beginners in terms of gambling at these properties because of the offset of it being a more sort of budget-friendly property. So you're going to find a lot of people, it's their first time playing blackjack or maybe their first time playing craps. So just be aware, for those of you that are gamblers, that typically you're going to find lower limits at places like Excalibur, Luxor, and Harrah's, Link, but you do get the trade-off of getting lots of beginners, which is not always great. So you kind of have to balance it out when you're going to these properties. I usually recommend, if you're staying at one of these properties, to try to walk over to a hotel that's maybe the next level up from these particular properties, so you can kind of understand what the differences are between the two. Sometimes you get a little bit better air system, sometimes a little bit newer property. You'll also get, a little bit nicer amenities. Like, for example, a lot of pools are viewable from walking areas, which kind of entices you to see, hey, how can I compare this pool to the pool that I'm at? So I always recommend never be afraid to walk into any other property. You don't have to be dressed a certain way. It's really ridiculous. I saw somebody one time say that they weren't allowed into Fontainebleau because they were wearing shorts or some shit. And the thing is, it's not true. I really need you guys to get off of Twitter. It's not a good place. It's not a good place for information in terms of, things that are going on, because you get sort of a note, then you read the comments, and it's absolutely trash. Las Vegas is actually one of those places where you get a lot of this. And again, try to find your reputable sources. But for the most part, you have to sort of look at it, take it at face value. Well, take it, with a grain of salt, I should say, and then sort of investigate yourself. That's really one of the things you can do. But never be afraid if you're staying at like a budget hotel like Excalibur or Luxor or whatever, don't be afraid to walk into like the Bellagio, to walk into the Wynn, because these are tourist attractions. These places are made for you, regardless if you stay there, spend money there or whatever. The architecture on the inside are beautiful to see, and it's really worth it to sort of walk through a lot of these properties just to sort of take a picture and take a look at it. It's really fun, and just people watch. It's always fun to watch different types of people because you get so many different types of people that come to Las Vegas. It's very, very interesting, and you get a lot of interesting stories any place that you go. So keep that in mind if you're going to be visiting Las Vegas and you're going to be staying at a super budget hotel, which is fine, because sometimes you just need a place to stay and a place to put your head at night. So that's totally fine. You don't have to be staying at like a luxury property, because sometimes not always worth it. So speaking of that, let's move on up to the economical section of our podcast. So when we're talking economical, what I'm really talking about here is places like Park MGM, New York. MGM Grand really fits in sort of this economical space because it's such a large property. Typically, larger properties like MGM Grand, they're going to really range the whole sort of scale of like super budget, economical, and luxury. There's actually 3 hotels located inside of MGM Grand. You have MGM Grand, the main one. Then you also have the Skylofts, which is the top floor, the top 2 floors of the hotel. Then you have the Mansion, which sort of sits outside of the MGM Grand itself, which that's super, super luxury. So You're going to get a range of all these things, but MGM Grand is a good example. MGM Grand, you're probably looking at restaurants for dinner that range between $75 and $100 per person. Again, this all depends on how much alcohol you drink and, of course, how many courses you get. But they have many restaurants on the inside where you can go in and look at spending about $80 to $90 per person. I'm thinking places like Lucchini. They also have a really nice... what else do they have? They have Emerald's, which is really, really popular. They also have the Jonas Brothers restaurant, which, forgetting the name right now, it's sort of Southern style. Live music, though, really, really great. But that's what you can find at those places. They also have the Greek Sneak. They have the Asian restaurant right next to the cafe. These are all places where you can find sort of this range. Obviously, they have multiple restaurants inside. They're going to be more expensive than that. In the luxury range, you're looking at places like Morimoto. You're looking at places like Craft Steak. So MGM Grand is a really good example of a place that you can stay on a pretty good budget and also experience maybe like one night of the finer things, which is great. I think if you're in this economical range, that's sort of like what you're looking for. You're looking for something that is in your price range, which is very, very important. I completely understand. But you're also looking that you want a night out on the town. You want to step it up one of your nights. And that's totally cool. I always recommend that everybody have, a nice night out. And again, that's different for everybody. Like a nice night out might be going to Buca di Beppo. That's awesome. Not for me, but maybe for you. And that's definitely something that you should never look down on. Never look down on people who are trying to try different things. This might be their one time you get to come to Las Vegas, and never try to pigeon yourself into one spot. I mean, I'm doing it for this podcast because that's the way pods work and how I structured it. But again, you can have a good time no matter where you are. Honestly, you could be staying at a luxury property and have the absolute worst time possible just for a number of factors. So never let the price of something ruin your hotel experience. But a really good economical space would be MGM Grand, Park MGM. Another good one could be like Caesar's Palace. Caesar's Palace, again, a very large property with many different room types that it sort of lodges itself in between luxury and also in the economical side. I wouldn't say they have very many budget-friendly budget-friendly rooms inside of Caesar's Palace just because of its location, and also it doesn't have as many rooms as MGM Grand. MGM Grand has over 5,000 rooms. Some of them are really, really old. And then Caesar's Palace is from 1966, but their rooms tend to, get upgraded a little bit more than like what MGM does. But for example, like an economical property would be something like Treasure Island. I would also throw in places like the Cromwell. I would say Paris, the Planet Hollywood. These properties definitely get to slide into the economical status because they have so many different things going on inside of the properties. Planet Hollywood is a really good example because they have Gordon Ramsay Steak, which is his steakhouse, which is super luxury. It's beautiful. You're probably looking at about $125 to $175 per person for that particular restaurant. But they also have like a wonderful little they used to have a buffet, but they have what's it called? Oh my goodness. Chin Chin, which is super, super popular Asian restaurant. They also have a lot of little shops that can do crepes. They do pizza. So they have lots of options. And also one of my favorites, they have Beer Park on the outside of the Paris Hotel. So this property itself is actually great, again, for looking at this economical price where you can find a good amount of room types, room prices, but also you're sort of in the middle of the action. You're right across from the Bellagio. You can walk over to Cosmopolitan. You can go over to the Planet Hollywood as well. And that's what you can find at the Paris Hotel. But the Paris Hotel just feels really clean on the inside. It's also really nice because it has sort of this old sort of 90s sort of architecture of being a themed property. Same thing with like New York, New York. I think New York is a great economical property as well. So with these economical properties, you're going to find usually a lot of chains or luxury chain restaurants. So, for example, Planet Hollywood has, they have a P.F. Chang's on the inside, which I always thought was like the nicest P.F. Chang's like ever in the world. But again, you're going to find a lot of these chains. You're going to also find, standalone restaurants as well. So just keep that in mind when you're booking for things like these properties. Also, if you're wondering, Vegas has sort of become the place for celebrity chefs. If celebrity chefs are important to you, most of the time, their restaurants are going to be, again, on the fine dining side, like Martha Stewart, for example. Then you also have people like Buddy's, and then you also have a couple other different chains that have sort of their niche, but those are definitely going to be more on the economical side as well. But we move. So let's go ahead and move over to the luxury side. So the luxury side is definitely something that I'm, super aware of, just because I don't stay on the Strip. Like when I come to, I live here, so why do I have to stay on the Strip? So typically I'll visit, which is what I like to do, just to check things out. But also, let me go back to the economical thing before. People who usually look in the economical range are people who usually are very specific about, the room type, but they also have like location involved as well. Economical properties tend to be located more towards the center of the Strip because that's sort of prime real estate. But there's a lot of properties that are on the middle of the Strip that would slide into the luxury category. I usually recommend that you want to stay in sort of this economical range just because you're typically in a good location. You're able to walk into the luxury properties, but you're also able to go back into sort of that more economical space for things like lunch or breakfast. And you can always go out to dinner to like the luxury spots as well. So that's why I say stay in economical, visit the luxury. That's always the kind of nice way to go. So moving into luxury, we'd be looking at places like the Cosmopolitan, Bellagio, Venetian. You could also, obviously, the Wynn and the Encore would be the top tier of the luxury status. Aria, to me, is sort of like economical luxury because the rooms themselves are very, very straightforward. So you kind of be careful when you're looking at these sort of luxury properties. But some of the things you get with luxury properties are typically newer. They typically have a better filtration system for air, so you typically don't get that smoke smell, which is always nice. So you do sort of pay for these things by staying at luxury properties. Usually luxury properties are going to have, upgraded features in their rooms. They'll typically have really nice shampoos by designers. Fontainebleau is a really good example of this as well, that they have sort of these designers sort of putting out these really, really delicious scents. They typically have really good views for most of these places. Like if you stay at Cosmopolitan or Bellagio, you get the fountains of the Bellagio as your view. Caesar's Palace can sort of slide into that luxury status as well. But typically you're going to have, more than 3 or 4 restaurants that are going to, range between $125 to $200 per person. I'm thinking of places like Prime. You can also look at places like Mayfair Supper Club, Delilah's. That's at the Wynn. These places are where you go to sort of celebrate. Obviously, if you're in a certain tax bracket, this is where you're going. But again, these rooms, you do feel it, but you just be careful. So you have hotels like the Venetian, like the Bellagio, like Caesar's that have been there a while, so they have that status of being luxury. But just check the rooms, just check when the last time they've been upgraded, because sometimes they sort of sneak it by you. But really, what you're getting with luxury is a standard of service that you don't get at other properties. Typically, these properties have less hotel rooms, which means they get turned over much faster, which is a very nice thing to do. So that's what I always recommend if you're looking at, luxury properties is it worth it? Are you going to be spending time in the room? Are you going to be going to the spa? Typically, the spas at luxury properties are top tier. You're going to get things that you don't get in regular spas. Like I know the Aria and I believe the Fontainebleau have like cold rooms to sort of recuperate, which is really cool. And always be on the lookout for these spas, because sometimes, thanks to my brother, he's let me know that some are co-ed, some are not co-ed. Typically, lower level spas, you don't really get that co-ed experience. But places like the Aria, places like Resorts World, I believe Fontainebleau, are co-ed. So a lot of the luxury properties do give you that access, which is more expensive, but you do get that access at the spa, which is always sort of something that people care about. So, but luxury properties, you're going to find the signature restaurant of celebrity chefs. So when you're thinking of places like, let's say, Bellagio, you have Julian Serrano. At Cosmopolitan, you have Jose Andres. You have a lot of these different sort of big names that sort of they're the top tier of that sort of status. So again, luxury properties are sometimes overrated. Sometimes you don't have to spend $500 or $600 a night to stay there, which typically that is what the price is for like a luxury property. But again, luxury is luxury, and that's sort of the thing that you go for. But again, this is just sort of like a basic overview of what you should expect from these different sort of tiers. Kind of just sort of making it easier for those of you out there sort of planning your trip of what you should expect from when they say a luxury hotel. But I really wanted to touch on this before I sort of got out of here, is what is a super budget hotel but not worth it. I'm talking about places like the Rio. I don't care that they've redone it and they still are redoing it. Not worth the budget. And then also like Circus. Do not stay there. It's just... I know Vegas is expensive, totally understand, but honestly, it's in a bad location. They don't keep up on the property. It's not part of a major chain. You also don't get a lot of amenities on the inside besides a bunch of screaming kids and also Adventure Dome in the back. People always point to the steakhouse, which is inside, as one of the best steakhouses in Vegas. It is not worth having to walk through Circus to go to that restaurant. And honestly, the steak can't be, that good. So again, that's just my sort of overview of a super budget, not worth it hotel, are basically the Rio and Circus. Those places are not worth it. But I digress. So anyways, that was our episode today of Concierge Confidential. We went over a couple different things about being on the Strip. Maybe I'll do something about for sports people and so on and so forth in further episodes. But this is a really brief overview of the different hotels to sort of seek out while you're visiting here in Las Vegas. So again, thank you so much for everybody listening to my podcast. Make sure to follow us on all of our socials at Concierge Confidential _LV on Instagram. You can also follow me, Brian _Ortega26. And you can also check us out on TikTok, which is at Keys to Vegas. And always, check out those channels. So again, thank you so much, everybody, for listening. And I hopefully see you next week on the next episode of Concierge Confidential.